What's going on, Junkie Nation? Gorgeous George and Goze land another superstar. This time it's Bellator color commentator, Big John McCarthy. What's going on, Big John? Out in London, ready to call some fights.
I'm in London, ready to call some fights. I'm doing good, ready to get home after the show, but we got a really good show coming up, so I'm looking forward to that.
5 fight cards in 5 weeks all over the planet. You must be exhausted.
It's funny as I look at I sort of got I was thinking, man, the UFC does this week in and week out just about throughout the year. It's like they're crazy. It's a lot of work, and they got a lot more commentators than what we have, but it's a lot of work. I was sitting in my room watching fights, getting ready for the people that are going to be fighting on Friday night. So it's just something you got to do.
A lot of time zones, a lot of jet lag, but you guys have pulled it off. This is the final leg here. But before we talk about London, let me ask you, I have been a big fan of MMA finally in France, and you guys had that show, and I was watching it. To me, it looked like it popped, like the crowd was definitely into it, and this looks like the type of show or even the type of year, because I know the UFC is going to make a visit as well, where it's going to spring France some life, even more life into France, because France has produced some athletes, but France, I've watched sports all my life. They always come strong in the Summer Olympics. They come strong in other sports outside of the Olympics. I have a feeling MMA is going to be tremendous over there.
I'm telling you, George, it was so funny because there was a lot of people that they knew Bellator. They really don't know the UFC. And, we were talking about, no, they're going to be coming, and they got a great show, and they've got, Cyril Gahn, who's from the UFC. But it was almost scary as far as you look, you said, man, you heard nothing, and I mean nothing about the UFC that was coming up with Charles Oliveira against Justin Gaethje. There was nothing, but there was a lot of people out there for Bellator. The place got packed for us, and man, when their fighters come out, there's a couple of them that they get behind their people. They want their guys to win, and they're into the sport. Now they are definitely into the stand-up. They love the stand-up compared to the ground. I think a lot of them don't still understand the ground, but if one of their guys does something great on the ground, they understand that. So, they were great fans. It was a great place. I had been there before, and just a really everything was good there. The people were great, and the show was great. And they've got a couple of guys, at least Bellator has a couple of guys that are signed to them that they're going to be stars. And all of them actually, it's weird. I hate saying this, but they need to go down in weight. They fight above their size, and they're doing well. And they really have a bright future.
Yeah, even though the main event was a little slower than we anticipated, Bader had a game plan. He stuck to it. Those moments when Congo would create separation, the crowd was, I like that they were passionate all the way to the end. Even though it looked like things were going to go their way, they still were cheering on their guy, and then Congo all of a sudden would let some stuff go and, kind of make things interesting. But overall, I thought it was a home run. I'm really glad you guys went there. I'm glad you got to experience it. I wanted to know, how does that compare with other places that you've been to where it's been some sort of a debut either for the country or the city?
It honestly was fantastic because the first show that Bellator did here, I didn't even go. I actually did the broadcast from Hawley, Pennsylvania. And it was because, COVID and everything, and they only allowed 1,000 people, I believe, into the building, into the same building that we were at with, 15 some thousand people. So the fighters that were there, and some were the same fighters, they got to experience fighting in front of a home crowd that was full of, energy and going crazy. So it was a great atmosphere overall. I want to say one thing about Congo. No one knows it, but he pulled his upper quad in the first round of that fight, and he fought through it. So he was at a deficit after the first round, or even in the middle of the first round. So he really fought a hard fight, and having a guy like Bader grind on you that hard and that long and still at the end be going after him, you got to give a man, 47 years of age now, incredible endurance and incredible strength.
Yeah, for sure. And then let's talk about you. You just began your 5th year with Bellator. Time flies. Well, I remember it was 2018. I mean, I guess one year maybe was shelved a little bit because of COVID. So
Yeah.
probably 3 years of calling fights, 4 years complete, with the company, and now beginning the 5th year. And I think you might be closing in on about 100 shows. What's it been like? Now you've actually made a career out of broadcasting that you can now compare to your time as a referee and judge.
I don't compare them at all. They're completely different, and it's I'm a rookie. I'm still a rookie at this. I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to do things. Um, the refereeing it was so, I don't want to say easy for me, but I felt so comfortable doing it, and I felt comfortable that I was always going to make the right decision in the end, do the right thing. Obviously, that wasn't true because I made mistakes like everyone, but really felt comfortable with it. This has been one of those things. It's not easy. It's hard in the fact that you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to overdo it and say things that now the audience isn't understanding, because you got to make it to where they're comfortable with what you're saying. And you got to say things sometimes that, about a fighter that is not as complimentary as they would like to hear, even though it's the truth of what's going on at the time. Sometimes that's rough.
Yeah, and weighing in has been a success as well. We were talking about this pre-show. So commentating is one thing, because I think basically you're calling the fights live, everything that's in front of you that you prepared for. Weighing in, you've had a chance to digest it and give off another type of opinion. How much are you enjoying the podcast world?
I'm loving the podcast. I have a great time because I have a great partner in it. And, everyone, what it's like to work with someone that, you get along with so well. When you got Goze there. I mean, you guys had Trig and you got rid of him. Great idea. But, seriously, it's when you get along with the people that you're working with, it makes it so easy. And look at Josh is a smart ass. I'm a smart ass. And we both, push each other's buttons and do things to each other. And we have a blast doing it because everything we do is real. Everyone thinks that, oh, you couldn't be doing this. But we laugh at each other. We make fun of each other. We back each other up. He's a great person. He's a super loyal guy, super, into always trying to do the right thing for people. And so he makes it fun for me.
And so now that you've been on this side of things for a while, what do you think of fighters overall that they really don't like hearing that either their fight sucked or they fought less, subpar or anything? Has that wound up ruining your relationships, or have you been able to kind of like at least have a frank discussion and figure things out, and then the respect remains?
Both ways. I've had it both ways where, they're mad and they get pissed off and they hate you. And okay, first off, I've never had a hard time with anyone hating me. I don't care. I'm just being honest. It doesn't bother me. I'm too old to worry about it. I don't hate anybody. I don't have that. And it's, I used to, and I've got rid of it a long time ago, realizing it's a waste of time. Everyone's going to have their opinions about something, and someone's going to say, something about you that you don't like. It happens every day. And I don't worry about it. It's like, it's funny because, Josh is a guy, he reads the comments all the time. I don't. Right. And he goes, you got to read this comment. I go, no, I don't. I don't care. And then when it comes to fighters, I look at it and say, sometimes, they get too sensitive about certain things that they should just look and say, hey, all right, let me think about it, because it's the same as what, I talk with referees, or what I used to do is, don't sit there and just dig your heels in and say, I'm right. Take a look at the other side and see if there's anything valid there that could make you better. And if there is, take it, steal it, use it, and become that person that's now better. And that's just what it should be. But you never try to hurt anyone's feelings, but you're going to somewhere along the way, only because sometimes, you get diarrhea of the mouth.
Well, honestly, I can think of a time where you kind of, the advice you just finished saying that you've given it to other refs and judges, you applied it to yourself, because I did notice a few weeks ago when you early on said there's no way you can call that first round for Aljo, you kind of went back and said, hey, look, I could see the round being called for Aljo. I thought that was tremendous. So yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of you kind of taking your own advice.
Yeah, well, look, here's the first thing. And Aljamain Sterling can hate me. And again, I honestly don't care. But I will tell you, I don't hate him. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. I think he is just a dynamite fighter, and he deserves, to be where he's at. But when you take a look at, judging of a fight, I did exactly what you should never do, and that's have friends over, be jaw-jacking with them while the fight's going on, and then think that you saw that fight as you should have. I didn't, and I went back and watched this. Yeah, you know what? I can definitely see why someone would say Aljamain won that. If you're going for volume, you're going to go more for Aljamain. If you're going more for power, you're going to go more for Jan. But it's razor close, and I was wrong.
John, in all the other sports, there are controversies, but by the end of the game, usually everybody has it all down. The rules, there's things that we've just dealt with for years. But in mixed martial arts, depending on where you go, sometimes the rules are a little bit different. Sometimes people just don't try and keep up with changes in the rules or scoring or anything of that. So we always lean on you to educate us a little bit. And so this past weekend, a couple things came up, and I wanted to see if you could help clarify them.
Let's go.
A 10-10 round. Can you explain what has to happen, in your opinion, for a judge to write 10-10?
Sure, there's a couple things. One is you'll have an instance where you have a fight that, we'll say a 3-round fight that enters the 3rd round, or a 5-round fight that enters the 4th round. There's been, 10 to 15 seconds of fighting, and something occurs which draws a foul, unintentional, we'll say, and the fight ends up where it cannot be completed. Well, the judges have seen 10 to 15, 20 seconds of fighting. How much has really happened? You've got to be very cautious in giving that. Someone would have had to have landed a shot that knocked the other person down for you to give that a 10-9 to one over the other. That would be a 10-10 round. The other thing that would be a 10-10 round is, I always say, the fights that are the worst, the ones that are there's not a whole lot happening. They're not really going after each other, like we saw with Carlos Esparza and Rose Namajunas, especially the first round. I was judging it. I didn't have anybody there. It was me by myself, and I put down 10-10. That's a 10-10 round, and it's really based upon neither fighter deserved to win that round.
Yeah.
When you're talking about giving an advantage to one fighter over the other, they both hit each other, I would say 1 to 2 times, if that, and neither of those were great. And you don't deserve to have an advantage over your opponent in that. So if I was scoring on that, if I was sitting in Arizona, the table would have gotten a 10-10, and I believe that's the right score for that round.
Judges and referees all have the rules that they have to go by, but they sort of have their own personalities, I feel like. And same thing in the NBA, right? Sometimes coaches will say, hey, some guys are a little quicker on the trigger. Before that fight started, I had made the comment that sometimes Keith Peterson, he'll let them play out a little bit more than another ref, let's say, right? And one thing that I had remembered was Herb Dean. One time I remember him calling for timidity, right? Mm-hmm. Is that something that could have maybe been called for in that fight, being more aggressive in that situation? Does that make any sense?
It makes sense to the person, and it makes sense when you're saying it. As the referee, I want you to answer the question: which fighter were you going to give a timidity to as far as taking a point? That's the problem. Neither one is going after the other. Both of them are being very careful. It's a matter of game planning, a matter of styles, and it just happens in fights. And the audience wants the referee to be the difference maker and hey, switch this around and make this good, because this is not what I paid for. And the problem is this, and I tell people all the time, Goze, a referee is never, ever going to make a bad fight good. You just can't do it. It's just a matter of the fighters themselves are cautious about certain things, worried about certain things with their opponent, not willing to engage like they do against somebody else. You cannot make a bad fight good, but I guarantee you that a referee can make a good fight bad. And that's what you don't want to do either. So you're in that position. If you're Keith Peterson, could he have, issued, a timidity warning to them? Yes. Could he have said, hey, I'm going to take points from both of you? Yes. But what's it really going to do in the end? it's not going to change much of what they're doing. And part of the reason it's not going to change much of what they're doing is, and this is where people are, you got to look towards the corners at times. Listen to the corner of Rose Namajunas. Pat Barry and Trevor, they're telling her she's winning. They're telling her that she's doing exactly what they want her to do. And so she's going to carry on with what it is. Carla, her corner's basically saying the same thing. She's worried about this, just stick with what you're doing. And that kind of leads to it too. And it's not that the corners are doing anything wrong. It's just that it's the whole game coming together where game plans we want to keep on our feet and keep distance. We want to, make sure that we don't get hit with something big. We want to try to take down on a good position. And it just ends up being a bad fight. It happens.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the point, actually. I was wondering the same thing as Goze. Could there have been a warning, for sure? Maybe he gets through the first round and then waits till 60 to 90 seconds into the second and then steps in, because I know there's a feeling out process. I know it's high stakes. There's a lot of pressure. But, geez, I think a warning could go far. I don't know if it changes anything or not, but do you think maybe it was just because Keith is a great ref, honestly, but at the same time, he's not an experienced title fight ref. So it could be that maybe this was his learning, learning moment.
He might learn from it. I can tell you that, one of the, a fight just like that, it was in Bellator and that I was refereeing, and it was a title fight between Melvin Manhoef and Rafael Carvalho. And the first round was horrible. I mean, they hardly touched it. There was one kick landed by each. That was all I could count. And I stopped them in the middle, of the first round and told them, hey, you need to give the judges something to look at.
Yes.
You're doing nothing. Get after this, right? And then at the end of the round, I did the same thing, but it didn't change it. It was just a bad matchup. When they fought again, there was a knockout. But I had scored that one. In my mind, I said, well, that's a 10-10 round. None of the judges went 10-10 because judges are very hesitant to do a 10-10. But when you have something that is basically a horrible matchup as far as there's nothing happening, that's when you'll see the 10-10 or should see the 10-10. Not when you have this, great snobber blood, this snot's getting knocked all over. People are going down left and right. Oh, there's a difference in those, and that's the ones that the judges should be able to see the difference.
Yeah, and I mentioned it. We talked to Logan Storley earlier, but as much as everyone's trying to put this in the rearview mirror, that fight, because obviously it wasn't any good, I think a lot of us can learn a lot. Keith, we mentioned him, but I told Storley, I go, you're a wrestler. Carla's a wrestler. MVP wants to stay standing because he's a striker. I would almost say hopefully they watched it or will watch it, because there pretty much could be something to at least stealing the 10-9. I mean, if there was ever going to be 10-10s, it was that first round, and there wasn't. That means the judges want to write something down. So there's got to be some sort of a strategy there where if nothing's going on, I know once you're out there, you don't really have a helmet where the offensive coordinator's talking to you. You can hear the corner or whatever, but I think that's going to be the next level of MMA, is at least knowing how to maybe secure that round. If you think about it, Jan and Sterling, as fun of a fight as that was, it went down to how the first round was scored. You can't just give away a round if you're a fighter. So hopefully a lot of people learn from this, including the fighters themselves.
I agree with you. It's tough, man, when you're the fighter and you're out there and you're listening to your corner, and that's what you're supposed to do. There were fights on that night that I looked at, and I'm listening to the corner, and I see a fighter go back and the corner tells him, okay, you won that round. I'm going, what are you talking about? How are you telling your fighter that they won a round that you have no idea that the judges are going to go with you on that? It's too close. But, they're doing that. And the problem is usually with the corner is everything that their fighter does is just a little bit better in their eyes. And everything the opponent does is not quite as good. And if you're in that position, man, you really should never be telling your fighter that they won the round. The best you can do is say, hey, I can't tell you if you won that one or not, so we're going to say you lost. We need the next one.
Yeah. And, of course, this is the main event for Bellator 281 that we're discussing here, Storley versus MVP for the interim title. Much respect to Amasov, who's fighting for his country right now. We wish him the best, full health, that this thing just ends in Ukraine, and that obviously he can come back. But these two gentlemen are gonna fight for the interim title. I don't know if I said vacant, but that's the interim title. And if I'm not mistaken, weren't you the ref of MVP versus Evangelista Cyborg?
Yeah, I was.
Ooh, man, like
Ooh.
that's still a fight that like shakes me to the core when I think about it, man. Just hearing that skull crack and then seeing the result. But I wanted to ask you, is the fight gonna be does the fight really kind of like take a different course if Logan tries to wrestle and those takedowns get stuffed? You know, that's a huge win for MVP. Or MVP is out there striking, and next thing you know, he's getting hit with a 1-2 that he didn't expect, or maybe some leg kicks. Is that the kind of stuff you watch for? Is not necessarily their strengths, but who's maybe thwarting the other guy's strength, and like maybe that's the direction the fight can go in?
Oh, of course. You're taking a look if Logan Storley goes out there's different ways of him attacking MVP. MVP is weird anyways, as far as, the way he, conducts himself with his stand-up. His hands are down. That usually makes taking him down more difficult because his hands are not up. They're in that down position. So he's able to get underhooks and be able to lift you up as you start to try to come in on his legs. So that makes it difficult for Logan. The other part is he's very fast and his footwork is very good. And you look at that, shot you're talking about with Evangelista Cyborg Santos, man, that thing happened fast. And that's how quick he can bring a flying knee. And Logan needs to be very careful about where he puts his head when he's deciding to take that shot. But then in reverse, you can take a look and say, MVP is going to be looking for the takedowns, and Logan can disguise those. He can hide the takedowns behind his hands, but he can also hide his hands behind the threat of the takedown and make someone think that he's coming in for that takedown. And here comes the overhand right, and you're bringing your hands in that downward position to make sure that you can stop the takedown, and there's a free shot at your chin. So it goes both ways. And both guys have they're both outstanding at what they do. Logan Storley's wrestling is unbelievable for MMA. And I don't say that. I'm not saying that because I'm with Bellator. I'm telling you, not every wrestler's wrestling transfers into MMA. His does beautifully. And he is so good at changing levels, turning the corners on guys, and then being able to chain techniques together where a guy is stopping his first attack, but here comes his second, and he's almost, he's going to stop that. And here comes the third, and he's on his ass. Logan is unbelievable at that. So his wrestling is as good as it gets in MMA. You're not going to find many people that do it better. You'll get guys that may have had, better wrestling career. But man, I'm telling you, Logan Storley in the wrestling game is unbelievable. And you know what MVP can do in the stand-up. So it's the classic, it's the striker versus the grappler. This is what made the sport of MMA, and that's what makes it fun.
Is that, by the way, the most violent strike you've ever refed or been a part of? Third man in the cage?
Honest to God, that was the hardest. It sounded, I try to tell people, if you're wearing your Dodger hat. So if you've ever been to batting practice and you've ever, heard guys, that can really hit, if you go to batting practice and you saw, the old time guys like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa or Barry Bonds, and you hear the crack of the bat when they hit the ball and it's going out of the park, it was that loud. And when he went down, I realized, as soon as he got hit, I could see he turned and he was actually bracing himself when he went down, which is telling me he's not out. But then I see his feet kicking. I said, okay, that's it. We're over. And when I turned him over, you're used to seeing lumps and bumps in MMA. That's just part of the game. Right. You're not used to seeing dents, indentations. And that's what I was looking at. And I was like, oh my God, he broke the front part of his skull, with that knee. Because I actually thought that he hit him in the nose when he first got hit. And you could see it. It was the skin around it was just this gray color. And I was like, oh, get in here real quick. I was waving to the ringside physician. We got a problem. So
yeah, that was something else, man. Two other stars on this main card, Lyoto Machida, Paul Daly, coincidentally, both southpaws. They're going to be mixing it up. Their opponents have in the case of Daly, he's got almost 60 fights. Both opponents, by the way, are 9-2. And so I think Machida has 3 times more experience. Daly's got like 4 or 5 times more experience. And I want to ask you, how valuable is that experience when it has to offset youth from what you've noticed?
It goes both ways, and it's Fabian Edwards is the opponent for Lyoto Machida, and I'm going to tell you right now that that's Leon Edwards' brother, and Fabian he's probably faster and more dynamic. I'm not saying that he's more technically better than his brother, but man, he is good. He is fast. You look at everything that he has, and it's all the things that you're going to say, those are the things that can give Lyoto problems, in the fact that age is now, not his friend. I go back with Lyoto looking at this fight. I was talking to someone about it. I said, this almost reminds me of the Lyoto Machida against Randy Couture at UFC 129, where Lyoto was fast and he was elusive, and Randy was Randy, but he was slower, and he was going to have a hard time, getting into him. And so you're looking, this is almost the reverse in, that roles. And it's what happens in the fight game is, as you get older, the experience and the knowledge, it increases, and that keeps you able to compete with these young studs that have all of these God-given talents, and then they're learning the right things from good trainers and stuff. But Lyoto Machida is a problem for anyone. The way he fights, how hard he is to hit, and the fact that he can take the fight anywhere if he wants. He can take it to the ground. He just doesn't like to. He likes to stand the fight up. I would say, against Fabian Edwards, Lyoto, sometimes utilizing a takedown and being in the top position would be a good thing. Will he do it? I don't know. But the guy he's fighting is for real.
Yeah.
John, I want to get a little silly for a second, okay?
Let's go.
You talked about this this youth talent that we have in the sport. The sport has come a long way. You were there for UFC 1, okay? I think if you were to tell some fighters today, Bellator has the Grand Prix, PFL has their season, and they actually had to fight twice in one night for a couple of years. But it wasn't anything like UFC 1, okay? That was a different animal. If you had to guess, what percentage of the Bellator roster could have won UFC 1 if they entered today as a fighter today?
Oh my God. Well, Goze, it's such a different sport. Everyone knows everything. And it was, back then it was a style versus style. We just don't have that. You can look and say, all right, MVP versus Storley is a grappler versus a striker. Yes. But MVP knows the ground game. And, the very first fight I ever reffed of his, he got a submission. So you look and you go, he wasn't just that one pure, striker aspect. This guy has done a ton of work of making himself be able to stop the wrestlers, be able to, take the takedown and make it work for him. He's been able to figure out how to have a submission game. Logan Storley, a great wrestler, but he uses his hands, and you take a look at what he did with Naaman Gracie in that fight. It was mostly his stand-up which won him the fight. And you look and you go, there weren't that many people back then. It was just different. So, percentage-wise, obviously, I'm going to have to count out some of the lighter, people in it just based on weight, but a ton. It's just a different game, and it's, the sport is better today. It's like computers. It's like anything else. The fighters of today are just better than the fighters of the past. Now, that doesn't, I want to say one thing. That doesn't mean that we should be touting everybody as the greatest of all time, like is done sometimes with certain fighters. There are guys that are still standouts that deserve, the right to be in that, hey, this guy was special against everybody. But, not many people of that crew at UFC 1 could have beaten anyone here now.
Hey, John, so I agree with you. I think it's a very high percentage, but whatever it is, let's just call it 90%.
Okay.
I drop it 2 or 3 just because I feel like it's such a different animal. No gloves. The first time somebody gets hit in the nuts, or having to do it so many times in one night. There are just a few things that I think even doctors at times throw up, or you know, like you mentioned when you looked at what happened to Cyborg, even you were like, whoa. I think there are just a few of those. I drop it where they go, man, no gloves. Are you kidding me? This guy just hit me in the nuts. What's going on? I got soccer kicked. I think there's a couple of those, but yeah, the sport has come a long way.
I got to give you one. At UFC 1, nut shots were illegal. There was 3 rules: no biting, no eye gouging, and no groin shots. At UFC 2, they said, "Oh, you guys said you could have done better with a nut shot. Okay, you can have the nut shots," and they put it in.
Oh wow. Okay.
Was UFC 2 the one where you were actually being talked about possibly fighting him? It was one.
Yeah,
right?
that was no. I was never talked about being fighting. I had put in the application and all that, and they made me the referee, and thank God they did. So,
hey John,
hey,
so all
this guy's a Gracie black belt back then. You were a Gracie black belt back then, right?
Oh, not back then. No, I was back then. Yeah, I may have been blue still, right at purple.
Okay, well that's still skill level, you know. From jiu-jitsu was running the game back then, and then you are about 6'4", tough guy from the streets, athlete, and then you have the police training. So I'm sure there's a lot of skills there. Why are you cutting yourself short, man? I think you versus Gordeau would have been an interesting matchup.
That would have been a fun matchup. I look at it as like I look at it this way. I would have done okay. And that's what I said. I'd have done okay, but I never would have been part of the sport in the way that I have been. I would have been long gone if I had fought, you know, and I was so lucky that they gave me that opportunity to referee, and then I kind of stuck with it. And I just took it on as, okay, this is what I'm going to do then. And one of the best gifts I've ever been given. So that's the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Let's close with this. I only saw this because it was in the news, but then I was perusing your social media before we did the interview, and that video so chilling of you and the cops that are entering the store that was looted during the Rodney King riots, or the LA riots, however you want to call it. I guess it was the LA riots after the Rodney King decision had come in. Yeah. You know, I figured maybe this was just a shout out to you and the LA police force. And then when it kept going and kept going, I saw you there. Can you talk about that experience and what you felt and what you were going through that night?
You know, that night was a strange night, but there was a lot going on. That was actually the very first night of the riots, and that was a store, and I think that one was in Wilshire Division. That it was a store that had all kinds of almost like a flea market inside or something like that, all these different stores, and it had a couple of pawn shops, and all the pawn shops were being broken into because people were, you know, getting guns. And we'd been shot at multiple times throughout that evening and stuff. So we'd watched a couple of people. There was people that were running out. We watched a couple of them see us and run back in, and that's why we were going back inside to find them. So I honestly never realized there was a film crew that was following us. That's how observant I am. I don't remember that at all. I saw this video once before, and you know, someone brought it up. I said, "Where the hell did they get that from?" But that was the unit that I worked. That was a gang unit, West Bureau Crash. And we were out for that night, all the way into the next morning, all the way into the next night, and finally got to go home after that for a couple of hours. But different times.
So this was before you were part of, I think, SWAT as well, right? You had contributions to SWAT, maybe not as a member, but I think you told us before that you helped set the SWAT team up, or were you a part of SWAT?
Oh, no, that was my dad.
Oh, that's your dad. Okay.
That's my dad. My dad was one of the ones that set up SWAT. So the LA SWAT team was the first SWAT unit in America. Yeah. And my dad was part of that. I was never part of that.
And I heard you say Crash. That's referenced in the movie Colors. Like Sean Penn and Robert Duvall are part of a Crash unit. What did Crash stand for?
LAPD was great with acronyms. And so Crash, although it sounds really cool, stands for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. Okay. And it was called the gang unit, Crash. So that's what it stood for.
Was that movie fair in the way, you know, it portrayed police officers? One of them was a little bit more aggressive towards the youth. That's the young Sean Penn. And then Robert Duvall was more of the veteran. He wanted to use his mind to connect in a different way.
And that's exactly what you get. You know, it's a matter of you're going to get young police officers want to go 100 miles an hour, and older police officers are of the accord of, hey, you know, you can't win all the time. You can't beat everyone. Be smart. And eventually, if someone's doing something dirty, you'll catch them. But if you can't catch them today, don't worry about it. You'll catch them tomorrow. And that's kind of like what Robert Duvall was the person trying to explain that to Sean Penn. Sometimes you'll get through to him, sometimes you won't. But no, it was fairly accurate in its the perception of what the unit was about. The unit was about, you know, causing problems for people that were causing the regular citizens problems. And so, you know, if we could put you in jail and take you off the streets because you were doing something bad, that's what we were supposed to do, and that's what we did.
Luckily, the veteran cop taught the young cop the story about the two bulls. So
that's exactly what
that usually gets through. I thought of one last thing. Are you still part of the Monday conference call with judges and refs, or did you have to remove yourself just because your career moved on, or you used to quarterback the thing, I believe, right? Because a lot of people don't know that. Everybody wonders about accountability, like, oh, everyone just goes home, takes their check. But I've tried to champion the fact that you guys are always trying to get better every week, and there's, I believe, a conference call with judges and referees where things are discussed, right?
Yeah, there was even throughout all of COVID, there was training going on and stuff. You know, it's amazing what Zoom did for us. It actually allowed more people to, you know, get in touch and to listen to, you know, veteran people and the judges that were, you know, the guys like Sal D'Amato, who's there all the time, and Derek Cleary, and they're on those calls and stuff. I have not been on those calls for a while now. I still sit on the MMA rules committee for MMA with the unified rules and stuff. Andy Foster of California is the chair of that, and so I'm part of that. But as far as the training ones and stuff, I try to step back because no one wants to listen to some stupid commentator.
Plus, you want to mess around with that new chicken coup and the tractor on Shabby Farms. Good stuff there, man.
You're Farmer John now, so
you have a great life and a beautiful pad out there in Tennessee. And John, I want to thank you. Goze and I want to thank you for almost 40 minutes here of a catch up. On Fight Week, we really, really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great fight. Folks, don't forget Bellator 281 Friday, 1 Eastern start time. Catch the fights on Showtime. 13 bouts altogether, including an interim bout between MVP and Logan Storley, and a lot of other talent scattered throughout the card as well, including veterans Paul Daly and Lyoto Machida. Thanks again, Big John.
One thing.
Oh, sure.
I want to tell both of you, hey, thank you very much for all that you've done for the sport. People do not give you guys the credit that you deserve for all of the interviews, all of the buildup that you've helped with the sport, everything that you've done. I know what it is. Other people know what you've done. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you for, you know, just being goddamn just fantastic people. I appreciate it, and I love you.
Thank you, sir. We love you too, man. That means a lot coming from you. So we really appreciate those kind words.
You guys take care.